Manoj? Okay, so last class we discussed about the lookup transformation, the remaining part of lookup transformation, persistent cache, shared and unnamed, recache, shared persistent cache, unnamed shared persistent cache, and its scope and all. So that was about lookup transformation, and we have covered SCD types. Now today we will discuss about one more important feature uh, that is called as indirect file loading. Okay, so what is indirect file loading in Informatica? So again, this will be useful in your projects also, and also for interviews they will ask you what is indirect file loading and how can you achieve it. So we'll take one scenario to understand what is indirect file loading. So before that, uh, in order to generate dynamic targets, so assume like I have one source, okay, either a table or a flat file. So this is my source. So if I want to generate targets dynamically, right, based on some condition of my source, what I was using, transaction control, right? We were using a transaction control uh, transformation to generate the targets dynamically. So likewise, assume like if I take a reverse case, like I have some 5 sources, okay, which are of same structure. When I say same structure, they have same number of attributes, and that data types of each attribute is same. I want to club these 5 sources, means I want to merge the data in these 5 sources and load it to one target. Okay, so if I want to do it, what I'll do, normally I will use here to merge, I will use a union transformation, right? We have discussed about union transformation, which we can use to merge the source, merge the records, or merge the source records from different sources which are of same structure, right? So if I have 5 sources, I can merge it. Assume like I have some 10 sources now. So again, I can use the same union functionality to merge the records, but what I need to do, for each source, either a file or a table, I have to create a source qualifier, source definition and source qualifier in my Informatica, right? This part, I have to create a source in my mapping for each of the sources. If I need to merge records from 20 files, I need to create 20 sources. If I want to uh, club from 30 sources, I want to merge records from 30 sources, I have to create 30 sources in my Informatica. And if I am not sure like how many sources I will get, for example, today, so assume like you are working on a banking domain or transaction, so where you are processing a transaction data every day. So you will be getting data from different regions. So for each region, you might be getting a data in different flat files. So okay, so assume like this is for Europe region, Americas, so like that for Asia. Okay, so for each region you might be getting, so some APAC region, okay, for each region you might be getting a different source files, the day-to-day transaction data. So if they expect you to merge these records, okay, they want you to merge the records here and send it to a target table. So one way is I can use a union transformation here to merge it. Okay, I can use a union transformation and merge the records and send it to my target. So if I need to create a union transformation, again, as many sources I have, those many sources I need to create. So if I want to avoid it, we have something called as indirect file load. If I use this indirect file loading, in my mapping, I can create only one source, and from that source, I can load the data to my target. So within this source, single source only, I can get the records from different files. Okay, I can get the records from different files within a single source. That can be achieved using indirect file load. And this is one advantage of using indirect file loading. If my sources are more, which are of same structure, instead of creating a separate source for each of my source file, I can achieve it with a single source using indirect file load. Second feature is like, assume like, so I am not sure of how many files I'll be getting daily. So today I might get files for 2 regions because I had a transactions on only those 2 regions. Tomorrow, if there are transactions on other regions, I might get 3 files, I might get 4 files. So I am not sure about my source files. So every day it might change. So in such cases, I just can't create those many sources in my Informatica and give the name for those source files, right? Because they might, or because they might change. The source files might, um, if I give create sources for each of the file and give a specific name, tomorrow if one of the source file is not there, when my workflow run, it will fail. So in such cases, we can use something called as indirect file loading. If the number of source files is more and of same structure, instead of creating multiple sources for each source file, we can extract that data from all the sources using one source in mapping by method indirect file load. Okay, how we can do it? Let's see with an example. So what I'll do is, I'll take a mapping. Let me delete these things. Okay, this is my mapping here. So what I will do is, in my source file directory, so this is my source file, one source file which is having employee data. Okay, what happened? Come on. 1 second, guys. It's stuck, I guess. It's not responding. Okay. Oh, it's of more length. Okay. Close window. Okay. Okay, this is my source file, which is having some employee data, some 13 records of employees. So what I'll do is, I'll just copy these files, some 4 files. Okay. So I'll say employee data 1, employee data 2, employee data 3. I'm just using the same file, but in real time, the files will be different with different records. 4 and 5. Okay. So we have 5 employees files So earlier what we used to do, if I want to take this file, if I want to merge the records from all these 5 files and load it, what we used to do, we used to create those many sources here, right? So I used to create for each file, I used to create one source definition and source qualifier. Like this, I used to create around 5 sources. So instead of that, I can do it with a single source. For that, what we have to do is, so how many, whatever files you have, all those file names you need to add it to one another file. So for example, I will create a file called emp data file names, okay, .txt. I created one text file, emp data file names. In that text file, what I'll do is I'll give the file names of all the source files from which I need to get the data. Okay. So these are the 5 files from which I need to get the data. So all those source file names, I am storing it in my one text file, and I have named it as employee data file names. Okay. So now instead of using creating sources for each of my actual sources which has the data, I will use this text file now. Okay. So we will use this text file and we will try to get the data from all these 5 files. So that is what indirect file loading is. Indirect file load, if my sources are more, instead of getting the uh, instead of creating separate sources for each of my source files, I can achieve it with a single file, single source. So now I have taken these 5 files, employee data files. I want to merge the data from these files. So what I'll do, I'll just create a text file and I will add all my source file names from which I need to get the data into this text file. And this text file, I will use it as a source here. So what I'll do is, now I'll go to my mapping. I'll say source. I'll go to source analyzer and I'll create a source now. I'll say import from file. Um, so this is my file, source file, which has all the actual source file names. So I'll take this, create a source for this particular file. So it doesn't have any header. So I'll take start import at row from one only, I will say. Okay. And it is not a delimited file. I'll say fixed length file. Done. Okay. It has one field. I will say like file names. I can give some name to it, file names. Done. So this is my source. So I'll use this as my source in my mapping. Sorry. emp data file names. Okay. Done. Then so I will just create a target file. Sorry guys, 1 second. Sorry. So what I will do is, so I have created one text file where I have loaded all my source file names. So now instead of creating sources for each of my source file name, I will just create only one source of my employee data. So all the source files are of same structure. So this is my source file now. So I won't create 5 sources, but I'm just creating a single source here. Okay. And then I have to move the data to my targets. So I will move it to a table, my target table. Okay, so this will be my simple mapping here. Arrange all iconic. What? So I just created a single source, and I am getting the data from that source and loading it to a target. But internally, what this mapping has to do is it it will not just get data from a single file, but it will try to get the data from all these 5 files. How? For that we need to do some additional settings. So I'll go to my, so this is my mapping. So mapping set coding is done. So I'll go to my workflow. File to, what was the mapping here? Yes, this one. Okay. So this was my section. I'll refresh it. I'll go to mapping tab. So you can see one source, one target. So now in my source file, till now what we used to do, we used to give the file name of my actual source. Here, what I will do is I will give the, instead of giving the file names of employees data where we have our records, I'll give the file name of this .txt file which have the names of the source files from which we have to extract the data. Okay, so I will take this file name, I'll provide it here. Okay, then what is the feature? So if you go back to my image, so what is indirect file load? If the number of source files is more and of same structure, instead of creating multiple sources for each source file, we can extract data from all the sources using one source in mapping. So that's what I have done. So I have just created a single source here by method of indirect file load. And okay, how we can achieve this? To achieve this, create a file and add all source file names into it. So that I have done. So I have created one file. It can be a text file or a CSV file where I have added all the source file names. Then in workflow session mapping tab, that where we are, go to your source and select source file type as indirect. This is the property which will enable my indirect file load. So if, so in your source there is a property called as source file type. By default it will be direct. Okay, there can be two types. It can be, source file type can be direct or indirect. So direct means what happens, it will directly go to the file which we have given here in my source file name, and it will try to get the records and process it if I have marked it as direct. But if I mark it as indirect, what it will do, it will go to this particular file and it won't process the records in this file. But what it will do, it will consider each record here as a file name, and it will try to find that file in the same path. If it finds that file, then from that file it will extract the data and process it. Once the first file data is processed, then it will go to second file data, then to third, then to fourth, and then to fifth, like that. Okay, that is indirect file load. Indirect file load means we are specifying the file names from where we have to extract the data indirectly. I'm not giving the file name of my actual file which has the data, but I am giving the file name of a file which has all my source file names. Okay, that's why it is called as indirect file loading. So now so that's it. I'm done. I'll say apply. I'll say okay. Okay, I'll save it. So before loading of data, so let me check my target. Okay, it has some data. I'll just delete it. Okay, so now let me run my workflow. So if you see here, I gave only one source. So, but it has taken 103 records from where it took 105 records from where it took. So each source file has how many records? 13 records. So 13 into 5. I think, okay. That is 1 second. Yeah. So now if I go to my table, yeah, there are some null records here. That is because I have not deleted the data here. So I think these lines are considered. I have just deleted the data, but the lines were still there, right? So it is considering as a record here in each file. That is why there are null records also loaded. So okay, in each of the file, so there are, I just deleted the records data from these records, so they are still considered as a records with null values, so they are also loaded. Now if I check it, if I run it back, so the record count should decrease. I will just truncate the data before loading. Oh, shit. Okay, 89, so it is reducing. Okay, so this is how we can use indirect file load property in Informatica. Okay, so just we need to create a file and add all the source file names into it. In workflow session mapping tab for the source, you select source file type as indirect. So then it will load all the data here. Okay, so from each record it is loading the data. So if you want to remove the null values, let me quickly do it. I'll recreate the files. Three, 4, 5. Okay, fine. Now let me run. Okay, 65. So 13 into 5, 65 records we have here in my target. So I just specified. So if you see, we have 65 records. Using only one source, I extracted the data from 5 files here using indirect file load method. Okay, so we have loaded the data from all these 5 files into my target now. So now assume like, now think like I need to know from which file I got the data. So there are these 65 records are there. So for each record, I need to know from which file it came, from which file the record got loaded. If I need to get that file information for each of these records, how can I get it? So there are 65 records, but I want to know from for each record from which file it came, whether it came from the employee data 1 or data 2, data 3, data 4 or data 5. So if I need to get that source file name information, what can I do? So for that we have a property. I have to go to my source here. So clear all. So this was my source, employee data. I'll go to the source. I'll go to the properties section. In the properties section, we have something called as add currently processed file name, flat file name port. If I enable this, add currently processed flat file name port, if I enable, in the column sections, it will create me a port called currently processed file name. And this port will hold the value of the file for each record from which file it came. For each record, this port will hold that source file name. Okay, this is currently processed file name. To get the source file name, if you remember, while creating targets, we had something called as in the columns. So where was it? Okay, this is a table. So if you go to a target, if it is a file, yeah, in the column section we have something called as this add file name column to this table, right? So whatever data I pass to this port, it will be considered as the target file name. Likewise, for source we have a property called add currently processed flat file name port. So it will create me a port with currently processed file name, and this will hold the file name of the source file. Okay, so I have created that, so I'll save it. I'll go to my mapping. So now that port should reflect in my source definition. So I will take it to my source qualifier. Okay, and from my source qualifier, let me just map it to a column called, okay, I will map it to my mapping name. I don't think it is yeah, so I'll just map it to the mapping name column now. So I don't want to rename again, so we'll just see it. Okay, fine, save. Now I'll refresh my mapping. So if you see, now mapping name column is null. So let me rerun now. So it's executed. Now if I go and check my target, so for each record, it is telling me from which file the record got loaded. So for the first 15 records are from EMP data 1, the next 13 records are from EMP data 2, the next 13 data 3, data 4, data 5. Like this, I can get the source file names from where we are extracting the records using currently processed file name here. So currently processed file name port from source holds file name of the record processed. Okay, and what else I can say? Yeah, further, if I need, so assume like tomorrow one more region was added. So there was one more file with employee data 6. Okay, so what I just need to do, I need to add this new source file name into my text file where I have the list of source file names. Save. Nothing else to be done. So no code change. So if I run it, now 78 records. So I will get the data from that 6th file also. Okay, and if you see, these are the records coming from employee data 6. This is what indirect file load is. So next important question, like so when we can use in real-time scenarios and all, how we can use it. Okay, so for example, take one scenario. You are so you are working on an intraday process where you will be getting the files on a single day. You might be getting 3 or 4 files. So assume like the file names are coming something like this, something abc underscore yymmdd, then hhmmss. Okay, dot txt. So this is your file name. abc1, abc1, abc3, something like this. Okay, so hhmmss holds the timestamp, hour, minute, and seconds. So I can't directly give the file name. So either you might be getting a single file or a see this, I can say like, okay, no problem, abc underscore YYYYMM, sorry, DD HHMMSS. So you are getting a file in this format every day. They are sending you with date and timestamp. So for every day when I get the file, so it will be same till ABC YYYY MMDD will be the current day, current COP date it will be. But HHMMSS, I don't know. Every day it might change. It will change for sure. At least the seconds part. So I can't directly go and hard code that source file name here. Since it has the seconds also, I can't hard code it here, because every day that seconds part will change in my file. So in such cases, if you are getting the file names in this format, what you will do is, before running your workflow, okay, before your workflow runs, you will call one Unix script. So this is where Unix will play an important role. Like you will call a Unix script. So in Unix script, what you might have done is, so the script might be going to this path, the path where this file is existing, and it will check, are there any files with this format, ABC underscore YYYY, yeah, YYMMDD, that every day it will check for that current day. Okay, so this YYMMDD will be replaced by my current COP date. So it will go and check if there are any files with this format, YYYYMMDD star. So if it matches, so if there is a single file, again this will be matched, because I'm using star. It's a regular expression which matches 0 or more characters. So with this, if it finds any files, any file with that, it will take the file name and it will load it to a text file like this. Then I will use this text file name in my source. So whatever name is there in that text file, it will get the data from that file and load it. So like this, we will be using this indirect file load. Okay. So I can't give this file name directly in my Informatica because the seconds part will change. Two things can be done. One thing is, in my Unix script, I can try to find a file with this pattern. If I find it, I can rename that file to abc underscore yyyymmdd dot text file or something, and maybe in my Informatica I can give only this static file name, abc underscore, where is it, this source file, yeah, I can just say abc underscore yyyymmdd.txt. During runtime of my mapping, I can replace that yyyymmdd with my current COP date. Okay. Otherwise, so either my script can do that, rename the actual source file to remove the seconds part, or I think it will disconnect in a minute, guys. Okay, we'll reconnect again. I can either remove the seconds, minutes part, hours and minutes part from the file and use it directly in my Informatica, or I can load that file name to a file and use the indirect file load. Anything is fine. Okay. It will disconnect now. Let me end it and we'll start again. We'll quickly join and we'll restart.